He has wiped out by his grace through faith in Christ your every sin, past, present, future.
Christian hedonist is somebody who says that my greatest joy, my greatest good is God. And therefore, I will pursue that joy and I will pursue that God above all else. So God's glorified and I'm satisfied.
You are now listening to the Pastor Discussions Podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 51 of the Pastor Discussions Podcast. I'm John.
And I'm Joe, and this is your weekly conversation on doctrine, faith, and the Christian life.
Take two, because
we just rambled on for like 10 minutes.
Maybe this will be more efficient when we ramble this time.
You won't forget that thought you had.
Yeah, I won't. Well, hopefully we'll get back to it.
So this is all manufactured, pre-scripted intro.
I'd like to think of it as rehearsed. We rehearsed it once, but
we don't have pre-made lines or anything like that.
We don't, but we rehearsed it. We took a little bit of the stuff that could go out. We maybe improved it a little bit, and this,
we'll see.
My friends,
we'll see if
this
is an improvement.
The improved finished product.
Okay, we'll find out.
It is Christmas time.
It is Christmas time,
and this is
super exciting.
Joe's favorite time of the year.
It is my most horrible time of the year.
Imagine if that song was, "It's the most horrible time,"
with that tone and everything. I'd love to do that song.
Oh my goodness. So why don't you like Christmas? Explain to us again, because the listeners didn't get to hear the first time why you don't like Christmas.
Now I have to think of how can I make this authentic and not rehearsed in my own head.
Well, just talk to me.
Yeah, so but I already said this.
Yeah, I know, and I already know. So make it as authentic and unrehearsed as you can.
So one of my biggest things is I'm just not a very traditional person. I don't get value in tradition, and from not just Christmas, but just any standpoint. I get that there's things that we can learn from our past and things that are valuable that we need to carry forward, but people just do things on Christmas that they do every year, and the only reason that they do it is because that's what they do on Christmas.
Yeah.
And I just whatever. I want to do things that have value. And then just from a pastoral perspective, since I'm a music person, I put music together. We sing songs every Sunday, even when we are during Christmas time, and people want to do Christmas songs, and I want to value what people value. And I know traditional people value tradition for good reasons too. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying that it can't
paint with too broad of a brush.
Right.
Yeah.
So I want to be respectful to that. But then you look at most Christmas music, the content's really narrow and it focuses on one aspect, and in some ways it can be good. But I like broader songs that focus us on more of the atonement and what Christ has accomplished, not just, oh, Christ is here.
Yeah.
The way that, most of the songs are written that Christ has come, and he's come for the world, but it never goes beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
And it never talks about who he's come for.
Yeah.
It's just the Messiah is here.
Yeah.
Come and worship him. And those things are in them of themselves good things to celebrate too, but without the perfect life of Christ and his death and his obedience to go to the cross and go to the grave and then being raised to life, and the promises that we have in that for those of us who have faith, that's where the celebration comes. This doesn't come necessarily with, it starts, right, with the beginning of the revelation of Christ that the Messiah had come, but it just tends to stay right there with most of the Christmas songs. And do people actually, this is the other thing about traditions is do people actually think about what they're singing when they've sung something 100 times over?
Or when they're doing their Christmas devotion, right, or whatever the tradition may be.
Yeah, whatever it is. Do you actually think about those things that you're doing? Do they get you to a point where you're worshiping God as you think through those things, or you sing those songs, or you do your traditions where you're honoring God in doing that, or is it just
ritualistic?
Yeah.
So, well, and the struggle I have with Christmas in general is it came from Catholics. No, I'm just kidding. The papist holiday. No, the problem that I have is we don't often think through the implications of what it's just sort of like information. It's the facts. We'll celebrate the facts and not allow ourselves to go beyond the facts to the implications or applications of those facts. So when I was doing FCA this last week, we're talking about Christmas and about the Advent, about the incarnation, about Christ coming, and how he came not to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many, which is a great Christmas text, but not a traditional Christmas text, because it gives the reason that he came. He came to give his life as a ransom for many. He came to serve. And the way that text works, it's an example of whoever would be great in the kingdom must be a servant. In other words, the economy of God's kingdom is flipped upside down with the incarnation.
Right.
Christ coming demonstrates what it means to be great in the kingdom, and that means setting your others at your own personal expense. And so what we talked about was this Christmas, think about how Christ came to meet your need, your greatest need, and now if you're in Christ, if you're trusting in Christ, has given you a new heart, has given you new affections, and a new ability through the Holy Spirit to reflect God's character and image him more fully. And what does that look like then for how you serve others and how you view yourself, and maybe selfishness in your own life and how you set yourself aside for the sake of others? That's a huge implication of Christmas. But we tend to just be like, we're in the same country, shepherds abiding in their fields, keeping watch of their flocks by night. And let's get through that. Like you were saying a few minutes ago before we started recording this for real, you get through that in order to get to the presents, right. Or the food or whatever it is that you're valuing in Christmas. So let me give an idea of what it would look like to focus on the right things, maybe have the right implications outside of a traditional context. Like what would something non-traditional be that would have value in helping people at Christmas time focus on the right things, or maybe think through the implications or those things that we just talked about?
Like I would say giving your Christmas away. So you were talking about some of those real implications are you set yourself aside.
Yeah.
That's what Christ came. He set himself aside. And he came and he sacrificed.
What if I really want it though?
I know. Well,
like Christmas is about what I really want.
Yeah. Good thing Christ didn't do what he really wanted to do.
He wanted to honor the Father.
That's true.
So,
all I'm saying is a good thing he didn't have our attitude. So.
It's a good thing we're being made more into his image.
Yeah, not
rather than him being made into ours more.
So we spend a month or 2 days sometimes.
Yeah, 2 hours. Amazon Prime, please.
Grabbing presents and buying things and sending other people our list of things that they can buy us. And we spend all this money and all this time thinking about those things for an extended amount of time, and then we get to Christmas or whenever we're together with family, and do we spend any time? And if we do, is it just, this is what we're supposed to do on Christmas versus this is what it's really about.
Motives don't matter,
this is
Joe.
What we're celebrating.
That doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah. Never mind. Forget anything I just said. So
haven't you been listening to this podcast for the last year?
So if that's how your Christmas is, like, why not all that money and all that time,
shake it up a little bit?
Yeah, that you are using to buy gifts or the actual thought time of what you're going to get somebody and how much time you think about it. Instead, like, use that money and that time and bless somebody else with it. Somebody somebody who's in need, maybe somebody who's just going through a rough season, whatever it is. How can you serve your brothers and sisters that are in your community versus just being self-serving and getting gifts? And I'm not saying that you can't bless your family too in those things, but like as families, do we think about, okay, how much money do we actually spend at this time just on ourselves?
Yeah.
Versus does that reflect the spirit of Christmas, of what it's supposed to be?
Which one? Christmas past, Christmas present, or Christmas future?
Oh.
So what you're saying then is it really comes down to the focus, like where your focus is. Because that's kind of like that. If you were to sort of boil all this down, it kind of comes down to we're maybe focusing on the wrong things at Christmas, and not maliciously, but just because we've fallen into the rut of Christmas and what it traditionally looks like, or where for better or for worse, where the emphasis has been in the past, or at least functionally where it's been, because we always sort of give like a tip of the hat to Jesus and like a sort of like a head nod.
Yep.
But do the things.
Remember, everybody, this is what it's about.
Reason for the season. Now, can I just please get my presents now?
Yeah.
And in that, maybe part of the problem is that we have functionally neglected what we should be focusing on at Christmas. And so, like, here's another thing on that. Like, why do we get this big push in December to act Christian? Like charity toward others, concern for others.
So why is the only time we ever buy gifts during this holiday?
It's like, if we really are, this family can't afford to buy Christmas presents for their kids, and let's focus on them now. And then, like, 6 months from now, who cares?
Right.
Their kids can't afford school products. Like, oh well, they got an Xbox.
Yeah.
We gave them an Xbox. Like, there just seems like to be.
So this comes down to a lifestyle thing. Like, has the gospel affected you in a way in which this is like a whole episode?
Yeah, we're gonna scrap the other one. It's what it is.
Maybe we should air this one on Christmas Day and then do another one.
We could do that.
Okay. So anyway, what was I saying?
You were talking about. We were talking about every year, it's sort of like around Christmas time, people focus on this stuff.
Yeah.
Blessing other people.
Oh, I was talking about lifestyle. Like, has the gospel impacted you in a way and affected you in a way where you only do this during the Christmas season, where you only think about others and blessing other people or giving gifts even to your loved ones during birthdays or Christmas? Or are you constantly blessing them throughout the year? If you're a gift giver, then you're going to give gifts, but are you spending time? Mm-hmm. Do you value them as your loved ones, and you show them their value throughout the year?
Are you concerned with others that are less fortunate throughout the?
Or is it only during Christmas because for whatever reason you got convicted or felt guilty about something and you decided to act on that?
It's kind of like the sort of like, you see this in even areas like church finances. Like, December's a pretty good year financially. Why is that? Well, maybe a couple of options. Number one, it's the end of the fiscal year and you've got to get some tax deductible donations to lower your tax bracket. Or number two, you're just feeling a little extra generous because it's Christmas, and that's what we do at Christmas. But why doesn't that carry through to the other 11 months out of the year? Why is it, why are we not generous like that, concerned for others like that, looking out for people in our community that are less fortunate like that throughout the rest of the year?
Well, and it's not like we're telling everybody to do that every month of the year, but like, does it only come to your mind during Christmas?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Or is it you're actively looking for opportunities to serve and bless others around you because you want to reflect Christ? You want your life to reflect Christ, and you care about sharing the gospel and seeing people saved. Like, what's your? I don't know if you said it in this one or in the one that we screwed up on, but what's your motive? Like, motive matters.
Motives do matter.
So, is your motive in Christmas? Oh, I haven't done any of this all year, so I'm going to do it now.
Got to make up. Well, and okay, so why do we do that? Well, because Christmas reminds us that we need to be moral people, because Santa Claus comes and he gives good gifts to the good children and bad gifts and bad coal to the bad children, and it's all about your performance.
I don't know how many people make that connection.
I just did. It's real. We've just ruined everybody's Christmas. Santa Claus stinks, and
you stink, and I stink. You shouldn't get gifts for your family.
You just sit there alone in your room and look at the wall and think about Jesus in misery. I don't think that's what we're saying, though.
I know, but that's what a lot of people will hear, though. You just hate Christmas.
You're Grinches.
Gee. That's what people think. I'm angry all the time, though. So
That's your face.
yeah, it's my face.
It is your face.
It is my God-given gift to look grumpy all the time.
It's a spiritual gift. We're pretty sure. So like we sort of talked about maybe some of the pitfalls or potential pitfalls coming out of maybe not drawing out implications for Christmas or not living those implications out throughout the rest of the year, having those in the forefront of our minds, or falling into a rut of tradition. And there are obviously some things that we can adjust in our celebration of Christmas. I don't think either one of us are saying don't celebrate Christmas or it's wrong to celebrate Christmas or anything like that, correct? Because I'm not saying that.
I'm not saying that either.
And neither one of us are saying it's wrong to show up to Christmas Eve service, candlelight service, or something like that. The question is sort of like, so Christmas Eve service can be a good example for this because traditionally, you sing Silent Night while you light the candles. Well, last year, Joe here, who rocks the boat on everything, we sang "Come Behold the Wondrous Mystery."
Right.
It's a great Christmas song, not traditional Christmas song,
right,
but a great Christmas song. Yeah. So maybe a good gauge is if that were to happen, like how would you respond to that? To the change to not doing Silent Night, but doing another song.
How would I respond?
No, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking like a diagnostic question for the listener. Oh my gosh. There's an invisible third person here that we're talking with.
Is this third person a very traditional person?
This third person is very traditional. And this third person, when they sit there. How will they
respond to that, or how should they respond to
that? Asking a rhetorical question to the listener to get them to think.
Okay, so I don't have to answer this question.
Don't have. Please don't answer this.
Okay.
Gosh,
I'm on track now.
All right, so you've got a tradition that you're used to. Something changes. It's not necessarily a bad change. It's just different. It's new. It's a great song that captures the beauty of the incarnation and the totality, the holistic view of the life of Christ and his resurrection and death and all of that we should be focusing on at Christmas. And you get your candle and you're waiting and Silent Night doesn't come on, but Come Behold the Wondrous Mystery comes on instead. How are you responding to that? And if you're
and why?
Yeah. Like if you're like, man, Silent Night really ministers to me. I really love that song. It makes me think about Christ and the tremendous gift. Okay, that's one thing. But if you fall back on, well, we've just always sung that. This isn't the right type of candlelight service unless you sing silent. Somebody's knocking on my door. Unless you sing Silent Night. That maybe is where we get into a little bit of an issue as far as maybe what the motive is or how tradition might have overstepped and become a sort of idol. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. So I look at Silent Night, and I think what happens with songs is it brings up memories for people.
That's very true. Traditions do that too,
right? And traditions do the same thing. But
don't necessarily limit it to that, because like if your family tradition is to have whatever prime rib on Christmas,
yeah,
and one day somebody else is put in charge of it and they make turkey instead.
Or ham.
Ugh. Which I'd be grouchy about ham.
Me too.
I would be very.
If you
grouchy
go from prime rib to ham,
that's a massive
huge
step
downgrade.
Down. That is, and that's just year round. That doesn't even matter whether it's Christmas or not. That's every time.
That's very true.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So anyway, traditions like singing songs bring up emotions.
Yep. So
memories.
So like, I think for a lot of people, when you've done something a certain way for so long and then it doesn't do that, like, it almost feels like an attack on how you used to do it.
Yeah.
Like you were doing something wrong instead of, no, but as we've grown or as we look at things differently, and as we examine those things, like, so we did Silent Night for the first 3 years that I was the worship pastor here. And then this last year, I changed it to Come Behold the Wondrous Mystery. So we sit there with candles and we light them to represent that light had come to the world. Mm-hmm. But it's also a representation of the light's come to us too. That's brought us out of the darkness for those of us who have faith in him. So does Silent Night, the lyrics of that song, does it get you to that point?
Yeah.
like the fullness. And I was trying to think, and like I was looking for a song. Okay, I want to have the incarnation because that's important in the birth of Christ, but I also don't want us to just stay there. Let's make the connection of Christ's birth to his resurrection and what that means for us. And when we do candlelit service, what that is representing when we light those candles. It's not just representing Christ has come to the world. Yeah. Okay. Why is that good news?
Yeah.
And without the rest of it, it's just a story.
Yeah.
So if the Silent Night can it get you to those things? Sure. But a lot of people get there because of the traditions that they've grown up in, and maybe it gets them to that point and makes them think of that because of things that have happened in the past. But I look at it and I say, how is a new person who doesn't have those memories and those things that are going to grasp onto them going to make that connection?
Yeah. Well, not only that, like when you look at things like that, like Christmas is a tremendous evangelistic opportunity.
Right. So if I would say to that person who's struggling with that is, while I want to respect where you go, what is that thought? If you, where does that come from, and who is it about? If you're deciding, when we sing that song, it's not Silent Night, it's like, well, I don't like this, and this isn't what we did, and this isn't what I like. Like, is our mindset, and this is the same thing with the Christmas mindset. It's very self-centered. Do we come into services or when we're giving gifts? Is our motive ourselves, or is it thinking of other people?
Yeah.
Because could we look at a different song, whether it's Come Behold the Wondrous Mystery, or there's a new version of O Come Emmanuel that works through the incarnation to Christ's resurrection to what we're looking forward to as well. So there's different songs that you could could be put in there.
How come nobody ever says Israel outside of that song?
Because because if you look at it, how it's written, it's is and then Ra-el, and I don't know why they didn't do E, because I think it just doesn't, like when you're singing
Israel.
Yeah, it doesn't work. They need They need that extra.
I'm going to start doing that when I preach on sermons. And so Israel was captive in Egypt, and
so like all I was saying is when we get stuck in those things and we look at them and we're getting frustrated that things aren't the way they were supposed to be, and it's not bringing up the memories that we like, those thoughts are generally focused on ourselves, and they come from a self-centered attitude. So we just need to, do we care more about what we want and what we want to remember, or what we want to feel, or how we're so in love with how things always were done and it has to be done that way? Or do we actually take a step away and say, okay, this is good for maybe this 20-year-old that's standing next to me that doesn't care about Silent Night and needs to hear the gospel in song or during a service like we've done. I mean, it just doesn't have to be music, but in your sermons that we have on Christmas Eve, they're gospel centered.
Oh yeah.
As in they're not centered on the birth of Christ.
Yeah. You made me uncomfortable and ruined some tradition last year for me too, because I had to sit at a table like Grandpapa telling the story.
I told you this was my suggestion. I didn't make you do anything. So
mutually submitting to you as a fellow pastor. But there's an aspect of that too where that I think goes beyond just the worship service, or it carries into all different aspects of how we celebrate Christmas, and that is we should be shepherding that holiday. So as pastors, we're shepherding it for the church. As parents, we're shepherding it for our children. As husbands, we're shepherding it for our families. And part of, I think, shepherding is not allowing it to become a route ritual that we do, and looking for potential pitfalls of, okay, my kids are amped up about their presents. They're not going to listen to the Christmas story. They're not going to get the point. So we're going to change something in the way that we do Christmas in order to emphasize the right thing to where it's focused on and it is the centered, and then these other things are somehow tied into that or added to that or relating to that somehow. So if we fall into a straight traditional approach to everything, we lose the ability to shepherd when that becomes just a ritual, or it loses its meaning because we become so familiar with it. So I think there's a shepherding aspect too, where it's good to change things up every now and then, because it does remind us of why we're there. It does keep us on our toes. It maybe even exposes some idols in our heart that we can, or in the hearts of others, that can be addressed. So for my kids, if they're amped up about presents and I say, hey, we're not going to open presents until we've read the Christmas story, and they're all, oh man. And like I sort of relating a couple weeks ago where that was my attitude, that attitude needs to be shepherded. It needs to be exposed. It needs to have the gospel applied to it. It needs to be used as a tool to point me to my need for Christ, not just, no, this is what we do. We're going to do this. You know what I mean? So there's a shepherding aspect too, I think.
Right. I think it keeps us from getting complacent and just doing the things that we do. Like if I look at what I want to do on Christmas fresh every year, if I get to that point and say, okay, how can I keep the true meaning of why we're celebrating this as Christians in front of us throughout our celebration time, so the shopping time and everything. If I just say this is what we're going to do, and then it becomes a yearly ritual, it's so easy to just fall into the rhythm of that. Where if you look at it, the same thing with singing songs or reciting creeds or going to a Christmas Eve service. It's just like, oh, this is just what we do. And we can just go through those motions and not actually think about what we're doing. Like those to me are some of the dangers of doing something traditionally without thinking it through. Maybe it's done, we do it every year. So that's the tradition part of it, is that we're going to do it. But the approach to doing it and the ways in which we do it, those things, I think there's huge value in keeping them fresh and looking at them every year. How can we continue to highlight this so that every time we think about this, it's actually doing what it's supposed to do, and it's pointing us towards Christ, or pointing us towards people's need for the gospel and my need for the gospel. That's the dangers that I see in traditions, and I think Christmas elevates that. And it's so easy just for us to go into that rut. So
your tradition is not being traditional. So now you've got a new tradition, which is I'm non-traditional. But like I say that sort of in jest, but then you come to that, it could be a real thing, like where your new tradition is non-traditional, and now if anybody does anything traditional, you're going to be upset because your tradition is being messed up. And I'm serious. This really is the Inception episode. I'm serious though, because the really what it comes down to,
you're like talking about like an idolization of being non-traditional. Then
I'm talking about all of these things. They all have the same potential pitfall, and that is we're not thinking through why we're doing what we're doing, and we're not doing it for the right reasons. That's really what it comes down to. Like you can do a traditional Christmas, like whatever that looks like, the same way you've done it every other year. And like you were saying, maybe what it looks like is, rather than you reading the Christmas story, your children that can read part of it, and then you ask them to rephrase what they just read in their own words. Right. So you're still doing the tradition aspect, or the traditional aspect, but like you were saying, you're doing it in a fresh and new way. So the issue is not is not simply just not doing the same thing over and over. Right. The issue is and I'm just saying this to clarify, because you know how we are. We say things and get misunderstood, but it's doing it with the right motive and aiming for the right result.
Right. The tradition is not. There's nothing wrong with tradition.
Exactly.
I just see it as there's danger in it because it allows us to get into ruts pretty easily without realizing it.
Yeah.
And then we can get stubborn too, because we've gotten used to something, and people like things that stay the same. Most people don't like change. There are a few weirdos that like change all the time.
Me.
And me a little bit. But like, I think maybe this comes down to, do you know, like, so for a dad or a husband, do you know your family well enough?
That's
and are
good.
you looking at that situation well enough to say, okay, we're getting in a rut?
Yeah.
Or does your tradition help you, and doing it the same way help you, and people value that? I think the same thing can be said for a pastor. Does doing certain songs, do people just go through the motions when you're watching them do things?
All about the songs, man.
Or
just all you care about is music.
I know, that's true. I could get rid of everything else if I music. Or if you so do you do Advent every year?
No.
Like and okay, but a lot of people do. Okay, so if you're a pastor and you preach through Advent every year and you go through the same 5 things every year,
yeah.
Like,
I see what you're saying.
You could get into a rut. That's a tradition we do. Are you refreshing it every year so that people are grasping and valuing as you walk through the hope and light and love and whatever the 5 are, the things, or is it just the same thing every year and everybody knows what it is and they're not engaging with it?
Yeah.
Like we can look at those things. Are we looking as leaders, and moms can be doing this too with their kids if they can see if they're in a rut.
Yeah.
Too,
and I think moms need to at times say, hey, I think we're in a rut.
Right.
Like that's part of that helping aspect that we need. And so like, I think that's a great point because, it's reevaluating where we're at. It's being realistic about where our family's at, where our church is at, where our people are at, where our friends are at, whatever it is, and looking at it holistically and saying, how can we make this meaningful for the right reasons and focus on the right things this Christmas season? So that might look like you were saying about, hey, this year we're not doing presents. We're gonna give them away.
Right.
We're gonna bless somebody. It might look like, hey, we're going to invite a family that is in town that doesn't have any family around and they can't travel to our house for the day. And they're going to spend Christmas with our family. That's very non-traditional, that might shake things up in your house a little bit.
Yeah.
But all of those things are, I think, important for us to prevent us from, however well-intentioned it might be and without any malice or wrong motive, falling into that. Because we are prone to that, I think, even in every other aspect of our lives as well.
Yeah.
But that evaluation thing, I think, is an important aspect of it too.
Yeah,
that's good.
So, and it just doesn't we got to be careful. It just doesn't apply to Christmas time.
Yeah, it's just this was low hanging fruit for us in this episode,
and it brings it right to the forefront of your mind. When we
I think it's a universal application because everybody for the most part celebrates Christmas. Everybody for the most part has some kind of tradition, whether you're a Christian or non-Christian. Yeah. I mean, you get a lot of people that show up to church twice a year. One of them's Christmas. That's their tradition. And so how can you help come alongside of them, and I guess sort of wrap up with this, like if you take a fresh look at Christmas, I think there are also a bunch of tremendous opportunities for evangelism and ministry that you might miss out on if you're not willing to take a look with fresh eyes and maybe think outside of the box a little bit.
That's a good point.
There are a lot of opportunities for ministry around Christmas time that maybe are not even present the rest of the year, but that if done well can set you up for ministry throughout the rest of the year. That gives you opportunities and to build that relationship, to have people over to speak the gospel into their lives. Maybe you're not even necessarily primarily focusing on that over Christmas. You're just doing something to bless somebody as a means of demonstrating the gospel to them with the aim of sharing it with them in the future and being a part of their life and inviting them into your life in the future too.
Yeah, so I would say if you have traditions, stick with your traditions. And if you're not traditional, maybe don't be traditional, but don't.
And if you're traditional, don't look down on other people that are non-traditional.
Right.
And if you're non-traditional, don't look down on people that are traditional.
Don't judge each other.
Exactly.
My challenge would be every year when this comes around, or every time when something traditional or you can attack something traditional comes around, are you thinking about and examining and looking to those around you about whether your tradition is helpful in pointing people to Christ, in exalting Him, in magnifying Him, or is it causing a rut in going through the motions, or even building up pride and saying, I'm not traditional. I don't do traditional things. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
So are you on guard as you work through, especially this in Christmas season? Like, have you thought about those things when it comes to gift exchange, family gatherings, reading the Christmas story, going to Christmas Eve service, singing the Silent Night, possibly hearing a sermon that you've heard 100 times over, or you're sitting there in traditional and you hear a sermon you've never heard on Christmas and it bothers you a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, what are you on guard against yourself and on guard for your family or your friends or your church or whatever?
Yeah.
Whoever that would apply to. So,
and I would just add, are you a different kind of Christian around Christmas than you are the rest of the year? You know, like when you look at your priorities, when you look at your time and monetary investments, when you look at the way you interact with other people, the way you notice people that are less fortunate, the way you, like all of those different things, is that unique to December? Like, does it start November 26th? No, 27th. It'd have to be 27th because you're ramming people over to get the best deals on the 26th. So does it start on November 27th and continue on through December 25th? Or is it, I mean, there really shouldn't be
give
a
them
lot
one
of
day off.
Yeah. There really shouldn't be a lot of difference in the way that we live our lives in the month of December than there is the rest of the year. So that may be a good diagnostic question. And if there is, like, what's causing that? You know, is it that I'm in a rut the rest of the year? Is it that this season brings out a change and a fresh rhythm to my life that's not there the rest of the year, and then I'm on autopilot the rest of the year? And how can I address that? So, Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night. If you're listening to this at night, if not, good day.
Or
good day. That was a non-traditional way to approach that. Oh man! So hey, we're going to be in Minneapolis next month for the Bethlehem,
a little over a month away.
College and Seminary Pastors, Leaders, Church, whatever they're calling it. They just Desiring God Conference, Desiring God Pastors Conference. They should have stuck with that
because this is way more wordy now.
There's a lot going on there. Anyway, we're going to be up there. You can go to pastordiscussions.com/meetup. We've already had a few people that have messaged us or given us their information, which we have since harvested off to all sorts of different ad marketing agencies to gain some money to run our show. I'm kidding. We didn't really do that. But we will email you if you get on that email list and give some details for a meetup where we can sit down and have a real conversation face to face. That's number one.
You guys, if you're coming to that, you should bring topics.
Yeah. Give us show fodder.
Sit down. We'll just talk about like some certain things. I don't still want to sit there and small talk. I mean, I'll small talk with you.
I don't want to small talk with you. I don't either, really. Like,
I mean, you could tell me about your life.
Maybe we should have a caveat. Like, ask Chris Hughes. Chris came up for the Cultivate conference, and we sat in our backyard and we got to know him. Like, we talked about our lives a little bit, and then immediately started talking about other things that were.
I like that.
Yeah, I do too. So yeah, Minneapolis, just January, like what,
27th through the 30th.
30th. Yeah, I'm just repeating everything you say.
Technically, it's 28th through the 30th is the conference.
Joe's the organized one in this duo. So, pastordiscussions.com/meetup. Also, going to Mongolia, and I've decided that I'm going to vlog there. Vlog. You're so old.
Video.
Video blog. So it's
I can figure it out. I'm not dumb.
It's a thing on YouTube, man. It's like So anyway, you can go to johnhawkins.net/Mongolia and find out more about that. And
I'm not doing anything. I'm covering pulpit while
you are preaching while I'm gone.
This is my contribution.
Dude, it's a huge contribution. Like I've met with some people that are supporting this and some people that are partnering financially and in prayer and different things like that. And one of the things that I've heard is like, man, I can't contribute much. This is a small little thing. And I'm like, no, that's huge. That's it. Something like this, like these types of missions efforts, these types of things are going to have a massive impact on congregations in that region through pastoral ministry improving and through investing in pastors and training pastors. And we all get to be a part of that. Like it's like Paul says, like there's a body that has many different parts and each one's important. And that's sort of the way I think of these types of things. It's like you covering the pulpit is a massive part of that. People partnering financially is a massive part of that. People praying on a regular basis is a massive part of that. And so we all get to sort of be a part of that whole thing together. So, I think that's it.
So support John as he goes to Mongolia.
Merry Christmas to me. You can
help, on this giving season.
Help me. You can,
hey, we could have tied that in so well to
we could have if we were self-centered and self-serving. Yeah. So, and I think that's it, man. I think that's all we've got.
All right. Well, hope you join us.
We'll be back next week.
Yep. We'll talk
on
about
Christmas.
Talk about something.
Don't listen to us on Christmas.
Well, Monday's actually Christmas Eve, so.
Oh, Christmas Eve doesn't count. That doesn't matter.
Yeah. So
as long as you're not listening to us instead of going to your Christmas Eve service.
That's true.
Because that's more important.
I would say so. Go gather with believers or listen to two morons on a podcast.
Yeah. It's close.
All right, so join us on Christmas Eve for the next episode of the Pastor Discussions podcast, your weekly conversation on doctrine, faith, and the Christian life.